Okay, thank you. So we begin in agenda item 9, in the revenue budget, year 2021, year 2022, pages 43 to 101. 151 Officer, Mr. Ben Smith, please.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I'm going to leave my camera off and rattle through as quickly as I can and draw your attention to the pertinent matters. So section 1.5 marks the first year of the CYMDEITHASOL Financial Management Code. It's dull as ditch water for most of you, but it's jolly exciting for me because it's a legal obligation upon me as a CYMDEITHASOL member, and I will be making sure and raising its profile throughout the council over the coming year. Section 1.6 in bold makes clear that in any scenario and in any measure, this is putting £22 million in. That's money in spades into the budget compared to where we've been in previous years. Section 2 sets out the financial monitoring report for the third quarter. I whizzed over that at Cabinet, but it's important I do briefly mention it here. As the leader has alluded to, my update on the third quarter and the sheer vast amounts of money that have been announced by the day and by the hour by Welsh Government has resulted in a material improvement of at least £10 million on the reporter position when I wrote the report a couple of weeks ago. And that has to be borne in mind in terms of the overall budget and also, as the leader has referred to, the recovery fund. Section 3 sets out where we were with the local government finance settlement, which was provisional right at the end just before Christmas. I've been waiting with bated breath and I had the final settlement yesterday, and I'm pleased to announce that there were no changes. And that's an odd thing for a treasurer to say, but given everything else that's going on and everything else that's having to change, is one thing that hasn't changed. It makes it easier for me to manage giving you advice in terms of setting the budget. But as I referenced in my original preamble, it's really important that you note all of those sums of money that are going to come outside of the main budget. So you're talking about the £35 million worth of business grants, the £15 million shares that I referenced earlier. So they don't need to be taken into account for the purposes of setting the budget, but they are vitally important when you consider the overall budget position. Section 4 sets out my budget forecast. And again, in the report, in the table, it's only bits in bold and italic that have changed. Before we might potentially make any further changes today. You'll see that there are very few technical changes at this stage, and that was by design because it was very much a movable feast, a living budget document that was going to be informed by the flurry of announcements we've had today. Section 4.11, I'll repeat what I said at Cabinet, which was it was a materially increased position for the school's overall budget position, building upon what the leader, the Cabinet Member for Education, and I had already briefed the school budget forum. Section 5 sets out the savings assumptions required. And as I indicated in the MTFP report, it is vitally important that they are delivered. They are modest compared to previous years, but it is important they are delivered so that the overall package of net investment is afforded. Section 6 gives you the outcome of the budget consultation process. And again, what was a most unusual year, Cabinet didn't have a full set of consultation proposals at the time because we wanted to keep it open for the maximum period of time possible. I see nothing in that materially changes my advice to you. Section 7 sets out the staffing implications, which I can only describe as very, very modest. These are posts theoretically at risk, predominantly posts that were left vacant and such like, and in the context of the overall budget position that a number of other authorities face, especially again across the border, that is something to be recognised and celebrated given the very difficult financial circumstances and economic circumstances that everyone faces. I mean, there's some trade-off here, as I alluded to in the MTFP. You've only got a budget set of assumptions that assumes a 1% pay award. You had a great debate in the chamber virtually on Tuesday. I can't pass any judgment on that, but clearly as pay awards go up, there are greater risks on the overall budget. And I heard nothing as an officer that indicated there was any more money available from either the UK or Welsh Government as a result of the past 2 days. So that must weigh upon any decisions you make around the overall affordability of the budget and the level of council tax that you are minded to consider. Section 8 sets out reserves, and this is an important one because it's a reserved matter to me. I am legally obliged to ensure that you set a lawfully balanced budget and one that has adequate reserves. Every other decision is entirely yours, but it's one that I must certify, and I am in that section setting out that I am so satisfied. As I've indicated, general reserves are still at the lowest end of what I consider acceptable. I'm only prepared to accept them in terms of my certification because of the very substantial earmarked reserves you've got. And indeed, those earmarked reserves stood this council in very, very good stead for getting through the last year. So again, any requests or asks to use reserves must be weighed very, very carefully. It's always tempting to take them, but my officer advice is not budget to take from reserves as far as possible, because that's what's giving you the firepower to get through. At the point of writing this report, and as the presiding member has indicated, there are changes still to come. At the point of writing this report, the finalised advice from me at the time in section 9 was to recommend a council tax increase of 3.99% set out in section 9.1. The rest of the procedure today will go through what needs to be done to decide on your final position. I can pause there in terms of technical advice, Chair, and I thank you and members for forbearance. I'm happy to take any technical questions on the substantive report at this stage.
Are there any technical questions for Mr. Smith? No one is indicating. Okay, that being the case, I will now call the Leader of the Council to give the budget presentation on the Labour Group amendment. Leader.
Thank you, Chair. If I could ask Mr. Evans if he would share his screen, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, just waiting for that to come up. Is it on for everybody?
Not currently for me.
No, not for me.
Not me either.
No.
Hang on.
No.
No, not for me.
Okay, we'll test that again. It's exactly the same again. Sorry for that. I don't know what happened there. It's this worked perfectly well on the trial just before the meeting started. Just give me another moment.
Murphy's Law.
Okay, I'm going to try another way to do it.
Who do you want me to try?
Give me a second.
Okay.
There we are.
It's arrived to you.
Yes.
But I've
Got it.
opened it a different way. That's all right. There you are. Thank you. Sorry, Leader. It's ready for you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Evans. I'll just give formal notice that at the end of my presentation, I will formally move the amendment, which I will come to and read out to members. But if we could go to the first slide, Mr. Evans. And I just wanted to start the presentation by recalling the extraordinary efforts that have been made by all of our staff and volunteers and key workers over the last year. As Mr. Smith referred to, it is an extraordinary year by any standards, but I am hugely proud of the efforts that have been made across the council by our staff and teams of volunteers. And there are some highlights in terms of things that have happened this year, things that we wouldn't do in a normal year, but that we've reconfigured and refocused our services upon to make sure that we supported people through this incredibly difficult time. And just a couple I draw to your attention. Obviously, you'll get a copy of these slides after the meeting. But for instance, we provided over 10,000 devices to children across Swansea so that they could continue to learn effectively from home. We employed an extra 140 social care staff so that people could be supported through this pandemic. We opened new facilities and increased our social care capacity so that we could look after the elderly and the vulnerable. Our schools were repurposed as emergency care facilities for key workers. We provided over 300 homeless people with a safe place to sleep. and ensure that nobody was intentionally homeless over the period of the last 12 months. We still invested over £44 million improving homes across Swansea. We kept 163 parks and open spaces open, and we cooked and provided over 10,000 meals for vulnerable residents across Swansea, as well as ensuring that we had over 1,400 volunteers organised and assisted by our wonderful local area coordinators, making sure that residents were supported across our communities. Those are just some of the success stories of the way in which our staff have responded in the pandemic, and I'm sure members will want to join me in recording again our thanks to our workforce for their exceptional efforts during the pandemic. Mr. Evans, if we go to the next slide, please. As Mr. Smith alluded to just now, there is a direct input of a net gain of £22 million into the revenue budget this year. And translating that into increases, that means that there is at least a 3% uplift for every department of the council, with departments like education getting in excess of 4%. And that is against, obviously, the current inflation rate of around 0.7%. So by any measure, and certainly in real terms, a significant cash boost to the budget here in Swansea. And again, I want to place on record my thanks to Minister Julie James for the work that she's done to ensure that local government got a significantly healthy settlement this year, far better than our equivalents over the border in England. And again, I want to place on record, my thanks to Rebecca Evans as Finance Minister for ensuring that not only were we prioritised, but obviously that we continued to get extra support during the budget that we could pass on to businesses and others to make sure that we supported people through COVID. If we go to the next slide, please, Mr. Evans. As I referenced as we went through the medium-term financial plan, the current proposals are to see an additional extra £60 million invested in services over the next 4 years. Mr. Smith has already referenced that, so I won't spend too much time, but it is in stark contrast to the austerity days imposed upon councils in Wales by the Tories over the border in England. And again, it is good to see a more positive picture of the future here in Wales. Next slide, please, Mr. Evans. Again, for those who've had the opportunity to go through our city centre in recent weeks, or for those that have been watching our social media posts in terms of our progress with our schools build, you cannot cease to see the investment that is being made in our city. We did run an election based on the fact that we would commit to building a better Swansea, and that's not just about the fabric of the city centre. It's about better homes for people, it's about better schools and facilities for children to learn in, and it is about ensuring that we create the conditions and the facilities where people can pursue the careers and jobs and opportunities that they need to succeed. So again, as of today, we have the largest ever capital programme that Swansea has ever seen, but also the largest capital programme in Wales. We are punching well above our weight, and we will deliver on that promise to build a better Swansea. Go to the next slide, please, Mr. Evans. Turning to investments in services, and breaking down some of those bigger numbers, I'm very pleased. We met, myself and Councillor Rayner, met with heads just a few weeks ago to give them the update in terms of what we could do here to continue to support education. And education remains one of our main priorities and remains the biggest element of council spend for the forthcoming year. So in terms of education, there's an extra 6.85 million proposed to go in, plus a commitment to invest 7.1 million in new IT across the schools estate over a number of years. 152 million remains the envelope of funding to build better and new schools across our estate, and there are a number of live bills going on at the moment. and we will see £43 million invested this year and next as part of that commitment. I'm also mindful, as is Councillor Rayner, of the pressures that parents will be under in terms of funding school meals. So again, as part of the budget this evening, we propose to freeze school meal prices at the current rate and not apply the increase that we consulted upon some years ago. And that is a direct help to parents who will be struggling with the cost of school meals. In addition, very, very pleased with the Welsh Government announcement just last week that uplifted the investment that we proposed to make in our earlier papers. So we can now report that we will see over £7 million invested for essential repairs and improvements across our schools estate this year. Overall, a significant and record-breaking investment in schools and education across Swansea. Next slide, Mr. Evans, please. Turning to social care, again, we have prioritised social care within the budgets of the council. There's an extra £7.7 million proposed to be invested as part of this budget, with an additional £1 million for essential repairs and improvements across the social care estate. We're also proposing to continue to expand our local area coordinator network, and those of you will know how essential those local area coordinators have been during the recent pandemic. They've helped organise an army of volunteers, some 1,400 strong, to support people in our communities. We've also, as I said, recruited an extra 140 social care staff to support people in our communities and in our care homes, and that will continue. And following representations by Councillor Lloyd, I am pleased also to make provision for an extra COVID pressure reserve to support social care in the coming 12 months. And that will be there should social care pressures emerge over and above what we currently expect with the COVID pandemic. Next slide, please, Mr. Evans. Thank you very much. Turning to the environment, again, we've given a commitment to invest in those services that people see on a daily basis. So in addition to the extra £6.1 million that will go in to help with our roads resurfacing, our pothole repairs, I can also commit this year to £500,000 for more energy efficient street lighting to be installed. Councillor Lewis has lobbied hard for that, and as part of our commitments on climate change, we will continue the investment. Over £11 million already invested, but of course there are still some of the old style lighting columns, and we will continue to replace those as we go. I'm also pleased to announce this evening an investment of up to £5 million in the sea defences for our wonderful world-class bay. This will see improvements to the sea walls around the area around Mumbles and up towards Blackpill. This improvement, which will protect homes and businesses from the potential of flooding, will also give will also give us the opportunity, once in a generation opportunity, to improve the promenade. And again, we will begin a consultation with the residents of Swansea in terms of what they would like to see as enhancements to the promenade, including potential for a wider promenade, for changes to the cycling and pedestrian routes around there, for further landscaping, and of course for lighting across the bay, following on from the excellent work done by the two members in West Cross, Chair. Going further, we are also proposing to invest in new electric vehicle charging stations across Swansea, building on the work that's already been done, and Councillor Lewis and her teams will be taking that forward. We will also be investing with further resources to deal with litter and cleansing across our city. Sorry, Mr. Evans, it appears you're going forward there. Could you go back, please?
Apologies.
Thank you. Including the provision of new machinery, as well as extra people out there dealing with cleaning across all of our wards. In terms of floods, they have been something that has been in our headlines in recent days, and obviously we send our sympathies to the people of Skewin of late, who suffered significant floods, but also our communities over the last year have suffered flooding as well. So in response to that, we will be investing over £500,000 to create a rapid response flood team, as well as providing additional machinery and support so that we can take care of more drain and gully cleaning and flood prevention works. We've had a very successful service that deals with potholes, and we've prepared thousands and thousands of potholes over the last year despite COVID. But we will do more, and we will this year launch an enhanced patch service, ensuring that wards will get more resources to ensure larger areas of roads and pavements in wards will be resurfaced and repaired in the coming year, as well as retaining our commitment to the 48-hour pothole repair service. And of course, Swansea should be very proud, despite some negativity from some members, about our progress in creating extra walking and cycling routes. We have had the lion's share of investment in Swansea over the last few years, and we now can rival many European capitals with the length and networks that we are able to deploy in Swansea for walking and cycling, which has been a real boost to communities during the pandemic, where they've had restricted ability to travel. If we could go on to the next slide, please, Mr. Evans. Turning to our community, members will know last year we launched a £1 million fund for extra play across our parks in Swansea. I'm grateful for members engaging with Councillor Francis Davis and Councillor Stevens on this, and I can report that through the work that they've done and the discussions that they've had with members, that play fund now stands at £2.1 million and will allow us to roll out the biggest ever investment in our parks across Swansea this year, some 32 schemes being rolled out. But that's just part of the picture, because we are also investing in better sports facilities across the city, including a new £6 million barn facility up in Bonny-Mine, and I know the local members who have lobbied hard for that facility will be welcoming that in the coming months as we begin to build that facility. In addition, there are further facilities planned, as you know, via heavy lobbying from Councillor Downing down in Pontarddulais, where we will deliver, with the help of the local members, an all-weather pitch. We will also deliver facilities which we've contributed towards into Dylan Thomas School, and we met with a head yesterday, and he reports that programme is well on track. Works are underway, and it's planned to open in May of this year. And I congratulate the head of the school for the work that he's done there to secure significant funds for that. We also have further facilities going on with the reworking of Bryntawy School, and of course we will be having further discussions in terms of how we can help other facilities across the city progress. We're also investing £100,000 in better public toilets. We invested a significant amount in last year's budget, and we intend to continue that this year. In terms of last year's budget, we also had some £1 million awarded for larger capital schemes in communities, and we will start the delivery of that this year, as well as providing over £700,000 for further community projects. Free public Wi-Fi was announced last year. Now that got slightly delayed because of COVID, but we will be delivering that this year. And what that also allows us to do is to help reinstate or install CCTV in communities. And I know a number of communities did lose their CCTV over the past decade or so. And this new way of delivering CCTV will allow us to reinstate some of those where members or communities wish it. We've also signed the Climate Change Charter this year, and I thanks to Councillor Lewis and our Natural Environment Champion for their work on that. As part of that, we will continue our investment in planting thousands of new trees across our communities, as well as hundreds in our new city centre as we create that green lung. I also want to pay tribute to Councillor Pugh and the work that she's been doing to roll out the current Men's Shed Fund. We have or have or will be making further announcements on that in due course in terms of successful grants. But I wanted to give a commitment this year that we would retain that fund for the forthcoming year, and there will be 25,000 to support further men's shed initiatives. And again, I'm very grateful to Councillor June Burtonshaw and the members up in Penderry who were able to get the first men's shed grant out of the way to support a men's shed in that area. I'm also grateful for the work that the Armed Forces Champion has been doing. Councillor Wendy Lewis has worked tirelessly to support veterans and armed forces charities during the pandemic, following on from the great work done by Councillor June Burtonshaw. Councillor Wendy Lewis also asked me if I would consider helping veterans in two ways this year, and that is something myself and Mr. Smith can confirm that we will do. So firstly, we will set up a £25,000 fund to support veterans who may need help or additional help during this period. But also we will be committing to supporting those veterans groups who have memorials across Swansea. We've had representations from a number of groups whose numbers are starting to decrease and who can no longer maintain the work that they were doing to look after memorials across Swansea. I think it's hugely important that we continue to look after our veterans and the memorials who commemorate those who have fallen in previous conflicts. So we will allocate a further £25,000 to ensure that we take on the responsibility to look after the memorials long after the veterans are no longer with us. And finally, in terms of community, Councillor Lloyd and Councillor Hale have obviously been standing up and making a very, very strong case for reparations for the communities of St Thomas, and likewise Councillor Mandy Evans and Councillor Paul Lloyd have done the same for Bonnie Mine. In terms of Tir John has operated for many years, and it was always a commitment that when that tip and area came to be closed and removed as a waste facility, that there would be a benefit for the communities for hosting that facility for a number of years. Councillor Thomas has previously reported that we are at the point now where that facility will close, and therefore I'm very pleased to announce that we will establish a £150,000 fund to help the communities of St Thomas and Bonnie Mine, and I'm very pleased to make that commitment this evening. If we can move on to the next slide, please, Mr. Evans. Turning to housing and homelessness, again, we've through the work that Councillor Lewis has been leading, we've invested hundreds of millions of pounds in recent years to upgrade our councillors' homes, something we wouldn't have been able to do, of course, if the previous administration had been successful in moving that from council ownership. So it was very, very good decision that we were able to stop that from happening when we were in opposition. But seeing as we are and do retain our council housing, I'm very, very pleased to announce that there will be a further £50 million invested this year to deliver better homes for our council tenants, obviously funded by council tenants' rents that they pay. In addition, there'll be £7.5 million for new council homes as we continue with our house building programme. And of course, we returned to do that a few years ago, and there are already excellent examples where we've delivered excellent homes for people with low energy bills, helping to remove a cost to families across Swansea. Also pleased to announce that we'll be employing some 40 new apprenticeships this year as part of that scheme, giving people careers and skills as they help us build our new council houses. There'll be £4 million extra this year to help us reduce homelessness, and we will be committing to continue our Always a Bed pledge, whereby anybody who is in our city who finds themselves either at risk of homelessness or becomes homeless, where we will ensure that they get a house, a home, or a safe place to sleep. And in addition to that, there is obviously £330,000 specifically to help us do that. If we can go to the next slide. In terms of regeneration, as I said, we have the largest capital programme we've ever seen. And that, I just wanted to draw your attention to some headlines this evening in terms of the £135 million for the Copper Bay development, part funded by the City deal, but a large investment from this council. That scheme is on track to reach practical completion in September this year. And we're on track to do the full opening before the end of the year. Members on scrutiny will have had a presentation from Ambassador Theatre Group this week. I won't repeat all of that, but again, Ambassador Theatre Group were very, very clear that the ambition being shown by Swansea and the progress being made by Swansea is second to none, and we are leading the UK in the type of development that we are providing there. But I'm going to go further tonight and announce that it is our intention to establish 3 further hubs in the city centre, one as part of phase 2 of Copper Bay. That will include a new public sector hub, which will be the home to our council staff and our council functions as we move out of the civic centre to prepare that site for development and regeneration. We will be joined by a number of other public sector partners in that hub, and details of who they will be announced in due course. In addition, as partly funded again by the City deal, on the old Oceana site on the Kingsway, we will be commencing the construction of the new Innovation and Growth Hub. Further details of that will be made in the coming weeks, as well as an announcement on a tenant for that, or a first moving tenant for that building. That is needed because we currently still, unfortunately, do not have the required quality of office space to offer companies in Swansea who need to expand, and therefore we are at risk still of companies moving out of the city rather than us being able to accommodate their growth here, securing jobs in Swansea. Finally, on the hubs, there will be a third hub created as part of our plans for a new local library service and local services hub in the city centre. That location will be confirmed once Cabinet make its final decision in the coming weeks, and details of that will be released to members in due course. But I can confirm this evening that we will be relocating the central library and services to a new local hub in the core city centre, helping to drive trade and helping to drive footfall for the businesses that badly need it. Taken together, those 3 hubs will offer upwards of 11,000 jobs for the city centre, giving the biggest boost of employment the city has ever seen. In addition to that, as I said, we will also be making arrangements for a £20 million recovery fund, which I will come on to further detail in a second. Outside of that, we've already trailed our commitment to invest over £2 million in Wine Street redevelopment, and that is already underway. In addition, we've just launched a consultation on the new Castle Square Gardens, and it is our intention, once that consultation is complete, to come forward with a formal proposal for adoption by the council. I can also report that the work up at the Copper Works is progressing well. Weavers are on site there, preparing to deliver the new Penderyn whisky distillery, and that is on target to open in April or May of 2022. Our Palace Theatre restoration is well underway, and that will again hopefully complete in mid-2022. We were successful in securing grants for a new private sector development of the Albert Hall, which will provide a new 1,000-person performance space as part of it, restoring the Albert Hall as a venue where people can enjoy and see great events, as well as having commercial and retail elements to it, as well as housing elements to it. So again, another key landmark building which has lain empty in the city centre for decades, being brought back into use by this Labour administration. And again, the 50 million Mariner Street development, members, if they've been into the city centre, will know that that is approaching completion and will be ready to receive students, assuming they can travel in September of this year. So overall, that is just a glance of the £500 million of the regeneration and investment that is going on across our city at the present time. Next slide, please, Mr. Evans. But as I said, I wish to talk a little bit more about what the recovery stimulus will look like. So if we could move to the next slide, please, Mr. Evans. In terms of the stimulus package, it is clear that it's not just businesses that will need support coming out of the recession and, of course, COVID, but is also our communities and our people. So as such, tonight I can announce a £20 million recovery stimulus, which will focus on 4 key areas of help for the people of Swansea. Firstly, direct help to local businesses in the form of grants and assistance to help them improve their businesses and their business premises, helping people to shop local and helping our local businesses to survive as things like furlough and other government support start to tail off. We will also be investing in upgrading our commercial spaces outside of the city centre. So commercial areas including Mumbles, Gorsinan, Sketty, Morriston, Clydach will all benefit from grants and investment in placemaking, making sure that our areas are more attractive and more inviting for people to shop. There will also be support for targeted transport initiatives, and is our intention to have a targeted campaign as people return to their places of work where they potentially couldn't take a park and ride for free for a period of time, as well as making it cheaper for people to park in our communities as well as the city centre. Many of the outlying areas already offer free parking. We retained that in previous budgets, but I can announce tonight that we will target a parking promotion specifically on Mumbles and the areas across from the commercial areas of Mumbles to ensure that we drive trade to local traders in Mumbles. Mumbles traders will also be able to access the grants to increase their business, the appearances of their businesses, and to help keep people in jobs. Direct help from a Labour council into an area which isn't currently benefiting from the promotions that are available elsewhere. Very, very pleased to do that, and I'm very, very grateful for the intervention of Rebecca Evans, the member for Gower, in asking for consideration of those measures, but also from Mumbles Community Council in working with us to identify some of the priorities that could be of most help to Mumbles in this budget. We will also proceed with transport infrastructure improvements over and above previously announced to help deal with bottlenecks in our communities. Moving to well-being, I've also said that we have the biggest investment in sport and parks and play. I can also expand upon that this evening, and following discussions with communities across Swansea, I can announce that one of the first things we will do is to commit to upgrading the facilities around the Phoenix Centre in Town Hill, where we will commit to improving the surface of the all-weather pitch there, including new lighting for flood lighting, so that that facility can be brought back into use, not just for the people of Town Hill, but for the people of Swansea West. There will be other investments that we will roll out in due course, but I wanted to mention that one specifically tonight because I know it is of interest to the community of Town Hill. In terms of sea defence works, as I said, we will move to improve our sea defence around the Mumbles and Blackpill area, but I give a commitment tonight that we will invest additional monies to help light the promenade and offer other improvements along the prom following consultation with our communities. More walking and cycling routes will also be created. And then finally, on the wellbeing stuff, our staff, as I alluded to earlier, as well as volunteers, as well as key workers, have really put themselves out there on the line day in, day out over the last 12 months. And unlike other areas of government, specifically our friends over the border in England, who have not chosen to give pay awards this year or to recognise the efforts made by key workers, we will launch a reward and recognition programme for our key workers, rewarding them and recognising them for the efforts that they have done. Now, we will initiate discussions with trade unions and other bodies to tailor the support in a way that is most appropriate. But we, where others won't, we will move forward as a Labour administration to recognise the areas and those who have made a contribution and put themselves out there during the pandemic. And I know that we are having discussions with Welsh Government at the moment, and I will hope that Welsh Government will be able to make further announcements in due course about how they might help recognise key workers in due course, but I will leave that to the Welsh Government. Turning to communities, again, there are a number of initiatives in year, including additional community greening and improvement schemes, and we will talk to local members about that, but this will be, again, a significant boost to the natural environment across all of our communities in Swansea, making sure that we do create that greener Swansea in every area of the city. As I said, rapid response flood teams, street cleaning teams, free public Wi-Fi and additional community safety improvements will all be part of things that will be considered and invested in as part of our community. And then finally, people and jobs. I've mentioned a lot of this already. We are already leading the way in Wales in terms of our support for homelessness people. There is nowhere else in the UK that is doing more to support homeless people or those at risk of becoming homeless. And in terms of job creation, Swansea is already identified independently to lead the recovery in Wales, with jobs growth this year of 8.1%. That is before the announcements that I've made this evening. And we give a commitment to retain and create over 10,000 jobs in our communities in the coming year. If we could go to the next slide, please, Mr. Evans. So finally, turning to our amendment and the level of council tax. As Mr. Smith said, the provisional assumption coming into the budget round was that council tax would need to be at around 5%. And again, both governments in the UK and in Cardiff have assumed a council tax rate across Wales of around 5%. We, when we came to Cabinet, acknowledged that we would need to reduce and balance the burden of council tax against the need to invest in services and the need to support our communities. And therefore, knowing what we knew at the time, we were able to move a council tax proposal of 3.99%. But as Mr. Smith said, there have been a flurry of announcements over recent days which have allowed us to go further. And therefore tonight, I would seek to move a further amendment to our budget proposals that you see before you in the report to reduce the rate to 2.99%. That will mean that we will set, if agreed, one of the lowest council tax rates anywhere in Wales, lower than Conservative-run Monmouth and lower than independent-run Wrexham. It will mean that Swansea's council tax rate will still be many hundreds of pounds less than the highest council tax rate in Wales, and will still allow us to outline all of the investments that I've covered previously in my report. So, Chair, with that, I formally move that we invest further money into reducing council tax. And let me just get the exact word in so I do it formally and properly, Chair. Okay. Thank you, Chair. So, just to say formally, we said we will continue to monitor changes in funding allocations and announcements by Welsh and UK governments, budgets as we came to set the final council tax rate for Swansea. Given recent announcements and to recognise the struggle that many families and residents will face coming out of the pandemic, we intend to act further to support our communities. Therefore, We intend to reduce the standard rise in council tax by a further 1% over the previous 3.99% announced, which in itself was reduced from the 5% planning assumption. We intend to fund this by reallocating monies available as part of a reduction in our capital charges costs of 1.166 million and a consequential reduction in council tax reduction scheme of 0.154 million. Therefore, utilising 1.320 million in total to reduce council tax for the coming year, allowing us to reduce that down to the new rate of 2.99%. I would say, Chair, that this has been done in a way that does not use reserves, because I am very mindful of what Mr. Smith said. It does not utilise the capital equalisation reserve, which protects council taxpayers from the costs of investment for at least the next 5 years. It also ensures that there is no cliff edge, because this money is money that is therefore money that we will be able to sustain without us having to go back to the taxpayer in future years. And it means that we meet all of our commitments set out. If you looked at the UK government budget yesterday, there is a deferral of pain. The Chancellor was pretty honest in that there was further pain coming next year. We know that the Chancellor announced that the £20 uplift in universal credit will disappear after 6 months. And he also said that the freeze on tax allowance rates will will come into force next year, meaning a pay cut for every worker in the UK after next year. Obviously, the bigger businesses appear to have a much greater period of grace from the Chancellor, where they don't have to worry about freezes or cuts or extra tax for 4 or 5 years, which perhaps suggests where the priorities lie for that government. What we intend to do, Chair, as part of this amendment, is to ensure we lower the burden on taxpayers now, and that we sustain that lower tax burden for at least the next 5 years. And it allows me to come back next year, Chair, to potentially offer further help to taxpayers in Swansea. So, Chair, with that, I formally move the budget report, and I formally move the amendment, and I would hope you could call Councillor Hopkins in to second.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Presiding Member. And I'd like to thank the Leader for what I would say probably one of the most ambitious budgets that we've seen in the most difficult times at Swansea. I've been a councillor for 30 years, and I think this is a really fair deal for the people of Swansea, who probably has experienced some really unfortunate times with furlough and everything else. But it puts us in the right place for the recovery. And I'm confident with this budget that we can recover COVID and financially get out of this crisis as well. So I would like to formally move the substantive motion, and also formally second the amendments, Presiding Member.
Thank you,
Chair, apologies. Just one final point which I meant to say is to give notice as well, Chair, now that I'm formally moving the amendment, it's been formally seconded, that we intend after the debate to move a named vote.
Okay, thank you. Do we have the support for that?
Sorry, Leader, can I just clarify? Are you looking for a named vote on this becoming the substantive motion, or only when we get to the final vote on which motion is the substantive motion? You're muted, Leader.
Sorry, on all parts, please, Mr. Evans. So a named vote on the amendment and a named vote then on the substantive motion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
That's fine.
Supported. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah, thank you. Do you need to read the amendment now?
But he's right.
Yeah.
So you need
Yeah,
to.
okay. So, that now is open for debate. Okay, so I will begin by calling on the group leaders, before then inviting other councillors to take part. Councillor Chris Holly. Do you want to say anything, Chris?
Yeah. Sorry about that, Presiding Member. Now, am I talking against amendment or talking for the budget as a whole? Because if the budget on the amendment, obviously it's to be welcomed, but not as welcomed as that what we would have liked. But if that's on the amendment alone, but if it's on the whole budget and the whole of the revenue budget, I'd like clarification on what I'm going to be what we're debating now. Is it the whole budget or is it just the amendment?
It's the whole budget plus the amendment.
Right. Okay. First of all, on the budget, I think I have to support the leader in saying congratulations to the staff. I think the staff over this very, very difficult period of COVID and through the lockdown, furloughs and what have you, I think our staff have been quite fantastic. And I've said this in other venues, and I think we have to congratulate, especially the people that we don't expect to be congratulated in many ways, and that is our refuge collectors and many other people that have been out there and carried on doing the work that we require to be done during any sort of work, any sort of well, not just pandemic, in our normal way of life, and I like to congratulate them. I think a lot of what the leader has said, he said before. And I think I quite like the way in which one of the slides followed on from another slide, and he said exactly the same. I congratulated him on being able to double spend that money. It was well done, and I think he needs to be congratulated for that. I think there's a couple of things that come out of the budget which I think need to be said, and that is the fact that we've taken on 40 apprentices. I think everybody needs to congratulate that, and I think that's a really good sign. I think the investment in our schools and education and social services is obviously to be welcomed, but it does say that where do you come, what level do you have it? And I think any investment is good. I think there's a couple of things though that I have to say I was quite concerned about, and I think one of the things I'm concerned about is he was very keen to mention certain wards like Townhill and St Thomas and Portennant, but I have to remind the leader he's the leader of Swansea City Council, and as such he covers the whole of the city, not just certain wards. And I would remind him that we have a policy, and he should be following that policy. And I know he does most of the time, but he does get carried away on occasions, especially during budget times, and that he should think about the whole of the city, not just certain wards. I think the other thing I have to say, this is one of the few councils, one of the few budgets he's ever put forward with, none of the slides showed any photographs of people leaning and looking pensive or whatever. And I think congratulate him for that. It makes a change. I think both of us were quite taken aback by the fact that we didn't have any of them. I think there's a couple of other issues which are a bit worrying, and I think you said about the way in which certain projects are carrying on, but I'll talk about that again because I think it's important that we come back to that on the amendment that we're going to put forward. I think in closing, I would say that when you have an uplift in the budget and that you're able to invest, it is a good idea to invest right across the board. And we are investing in education and social services. That is good. And in many other aspects we are investing. But I would as I said, I've earlier said it, but I think the leader needs to understand that the whole of the city needs that investment, not just certain wards. Obviously, when I bring forward our amendment, I would like to say a bit more about the budget as well. Thank you, Presiding Member.
Yeah. For group leaders, I've got Paxton. Paxton, are you going to speak on behalf of the Conservative group or is Lyndon good?
I will, if I may, Chairman.
Okay, then you're...
Sorry, Presiding Member, my apologies.
Yeah, you're allowed the the time allocated then to the group leader. Okay, Paxton, go ahead.
Okay, many thanks, Presiding Member. Obviously, it is a budget which is really good for Swansea in many ways, and we're not going to quibble on that in that respect. In fact, I would really agree with what Councillor Hawley has already said. However, having said that, you will appreciate, and we will all appreciate, the fact that we're not getting a 5% plus increase in council tax this year. Of course, that's because you've had additional money from Welsh Government. And of course, that is because Welsh Government has had additional money from a Conservative government in Westminster. I know you don't like playing politics with these things, but that's the way of the world. Having said that, we are seeing not quite such a high rise in council tax this year. And I have to say, since you've been in power, you have increased the council tax take across Swansea by more than 60%. That's in the time that you've been in power. All right. Now, I will remind you that last year was the first time that we have seen an increase in the RSG since you came into power. And again, we've got an increase this year, which is always welcome. And this was despite the fact that the Welsh Government had an increase of approximately 30% in its budget over that period of time, but chose not to pass any of that on to local authorities. As a result of that, and I can understand, you have had to significantly increase council tax. Indeed, when I look back, the council tax was only about 1/3 of the RSG when I came into this council. So where RSG came in and the council tax, when you compare it, was 3-to-1 was the ratio. It is now 2-to-1. And what has happened over the years since then is that Swansea has been collecting tax on behalf of Welsh Government. So this has been an indirect tax that has been applied by Welsh Government. And I'm not going to blame you particularly doing it, but certainly 60% increase since you've been in power, which is 2012, 10 years now, something of that sort of order. Looking at these figures, it was obviously the policy of Welsh Government to indirectly tax Welsh population via council tax increases. Now, you must have discussed this with them because you've been on the WLGA for a long time. So really the question I'm going to ask you at this point in time, Leader, is can you confirm that the Welsh Government policy of indirectly taxing the Welsh population via the council tax increase instead of taxing directly themselves, which they have the power to do, are you saying that policy has now changed and we're going to see a reasonable settlement on the RSG going forward from Welsh Government to councils? Thank you.
Thank you, Paxton.
Thank you, Presiding Member.
Okay. Okay, I don't have any leader indicating. Councillor Clive Lloyd.
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Member. I'll be very brief because I know that many members will want to speak tonight, but can I say how unbelievable I find it tonight that we've been able to present such a positive budget in what has been such the most difficult year in, well, certainly living memory, and certainly the last 50 years. And I welcome the leader's report, and you know, it really puts Swansea at the forefront of ambition going forward. From my own portfolio's perspective, I really welcome the additional investment. It's been really difficult, and I echo Councillor Hawley's comments about, once again, I will not ever stop praising the work and commitment of council workers, but particularly those in social services who have been on the front line of dealing with coronavirus, the coronavirus crisis. And you know, I think we, as I said on Tuesday, everyone in Swansea owes them a huge debt of gratitude, really, for all the work that they have done and they continue to do on a day-by-day basis. I'm really pleased with the investment that we're getting in social services, as I say, and we will look, as we have done over the last couple of years, to spend wisely. You know, we for the first time in many years, social services is due to come in under budget and not overspend. And I think that's a credit to the whole directorate for the way that they've handled themselves financially and through this coronavirus crisis. I'm particularly pleased with the amendment. I think it's the right thing to do. And I do find some of the comments from Councillor Paxton Hood-Williams a bit. I don't really understand where he's coming from when he looks. He only has to look at what is going on with local councils in England. Yesterday, I heard the Chancellor of the Exchequer say that one of the reasons that he felt that he could carry out his budget and that there'll be divided opinions on whether that was good or bad was that the UK's finances were strong. Well, that's certainly not the case for English councils. You only have to look at the papers on a day-by-day basis. They're under huge pressure because of the funding cuts of the last 10 years. 4 councils have to be bailed out, I'm reading, in the last 3 weeks due to funding cuts that directly affect things like adult social care. Councils in England are going to struggle, and I think it's a credit to the Welsh Labour government that despite seeing their overall RSG and Barnett formula funding being cut year on year, that we have been able to produce a budget that we have today. So I really think this is a positive budget for Welsh for Swansea, and I think Welsh Labour councils are in a all councils are in a much better position through the Welsh Labour government than they are than the counterparts in England. You can shake your head as much as you like, Councillor Paxton Williams, but they are the facts.
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd. I've got Councillor Peter May is indicated, and Peter, you can come in now. I would.
Oh, thank you, presiding member. Firstly, I'd like to echo the sentiments from other group leaders of the praise for our workers through these very trying times. It is much appreciated, especially the frontline ones are still going along providing vital service to the public. Commend the budget that's coming through. It is we are in difficult times. Commend the administration and also the officers for putting it together and obviously making it balanced. Especially when we're going to have some very uncertain future, when we really don't know what the next budget is going to be. Behold, that will be the acid test. Hopefully, as the country comes out of the COVID pandemic, we'll be supporting the Labour Amendment 2 on the principle of the council tax reduction. And I'll say here and now, I'll also be supporting the Liberal Democrat amendment if either amendment are considered to be safe or legal by the financial officer. And that question is normally asked whenever there's a proposal to cut council tax. So that will be the group's, or my staff's and Irene's as well, on those amendments. But once again, well done on balancing the books, leader, in very very difficult times there, and also well done for the political light touch you've shown compared to previous presentations. And I think it's very apt under these circumstances. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. They wouldn't be before us if they weren't legal. Okay, Councillor Mark Child.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Just like to repeat the praise of staff, obviously, that they've done above and beyond what anybody could have asked of them, and I reflect Councillor Lloyd's comments on social services, particularly, who have been not just diligent and hardworking, they've been positively brave, which is not something we normally ask of our staff. And so the efforts that this council is going to make to reward them, I think, will be well appreciated and well respected by almost anybody in this council, except one or two who don't think they're worth any kind of reward. I'd like to just, I think this budget is a brilliant budget, to be quite frank. It's after so many years of austerity, where the Tory government has denied money to all of Britain, not just England, to the Welsh government as well. To be able to produce a budget like this shows a very competent management of our council finances and a very imaginative approach to getting investment into Swansea from externally, whether it's public sector or private sector, and the city deal established as well, put Swansea in a strong place to come out of COVID and the 10 years of Tory imposed austerity. To as well as that, the leadership that I think this budget shows is directed at the people of Swansea, and you mentioned a number of individual areas, including some significant progress and advantages for areas like mine and West Cross and the Greater Mumbles area as well, which will be hugely welcomed by businesses and people and residents alike, I am sure. So I think this is it will be a challenge. It's been a challenge, and it still remains a challenge for the people of Swansea. But I think this budget puts us in a very strong place. And I'd just like to say a word about the Alice in Wonderland world of Paxton Hood-Williams, it's Paxton in Wonderland, isn't it? It's perverse logic to suggest that the Welsh government has been the architects of austerity in Wales, whereas what's happened in England is completely irrelevant and doesn't actually is fine. This is we all know, and the public knows, and anybody with half a mind knows that the government in England have imposed austerity partly out of dogma rather than economic necessity for so long. And that has, we've been shielded in Wales to a degree, but hardly entirely, by the Welsh government, the Labour-led Welsh government. So I will certainly be 100% voting for this. Cheers.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Lyndon Jones. Lyndon, you're allowed 3 minutes now, right?
Thank you, presiding member. So I could just answer a point made by Councillor Mark Child. When he talks about austerity, you've got to remember.
Point of order, Chair. I thought Councillor Paxton Hood-Williams had replied on behalf of the Conservative group.
I was speaking as a councillor.
Okay.
Oh no, the presiding member intimated. Sorry, I thought he intimated that you were responding as the leader.
I wasn't, and I think Paxton made that clear earlier. Could I say, after that interruption, the UK government, in fact, had to sort out the mess of the last Labour government, whereas even one of your cabinet members said there's no money left. So when you say about, gosh, there were tough times, it was because of the very poor way that the last Labour government led this country. I would like to thank the staff across the authority. They've done a tremendous job and continue to do a tremendous job. I welcome the investment in schools and the point that Councillor Clive Lloyd made about social services, because certainly I've had a number of issues involving social services and the staff have been excellent in solving that. One point that Councillor Lloyd made, though, was the point about the Barnett formula, and he got that absolutely wrong. for every £100 in England, thanks to a Conservative government, because it was a Conservative government that reformed it, no Labour government up to that point even looked at it. £120 is spent in Wales. So for every £100 that's spent in England, thanks to the Conservatives, £120 is spent in Wales, and that is why Swansea is in a much, much better place than it would have been. I also, and that was omitted really earlier, to thank the Chancellor for all the investment that he's given through the £5.85 billion that he's given to Wales. That money has come to Swansea. I know you can all put your heads in the sand about it. It's a fact. That money has come and it's been of great benefit, and that is why a load of businesses and everything else have been helped. Without that money, that would not have actually taken place. And finally, I'm very, very pleased. I know you've mentioned a few areas. I'm very pleased that you found out where Mumbles is. So I welcome that, and I welcome the investment there. I'm very pleased you now know where it is.
Councillor Robert Francis Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. You just woke me up there, and I thought I would gone to sleep listening to Grimm's fairy tales, you know, from Paxton Hood-Williams and Councillor Lyndon Jones.
Facts, actually, facts.
I didn't interrupt you, so please be quiet. Now then, what I'm pleased about is that we've got a leader that is ambitious, a leader who's learned a lot through this pandemic. And during this pandemic, people have realized that parks and open spaces are very important to them. Getting people will want to get back to sport and healthy living and well-being. The amount of trees we're going to plant in our city. This has all been recognized. And that our communities are very important. And that is why this money is being put into helping communities right across the city and county of Swansea. That we can enhance those areas, because through the pandemic, people have realized they've had to rely on their local shopping areas and local shopping districts, and there will now be investment right across there. Paxton Hood-Williams says, we realize where Mumbles is. Well, the only time I hear about Mumbles is when Miles Langston is claiming that he is responsible for everything. Now then, it was the leader that took the initiative to help people trade outside. If it wasn't for the leader, accompanied by Councillor David Hopkins and Councillor Mark Thomas, enabling people to be able to trade and supply. Now, I know one business in Mumbles, without that help, they would have lost 16 jobs. So bringing this council tax down to 2.99% will help a lot of people. We're still coming out of the pandemic. People will still be subject to perhaps redundancies. But this is investing in our city so that I think Swansea a much better place now than most other cities in the United Kingdom to get out of COVID and make sure that Swansea thrives. We've got to reinvent our city, reinvent our city centres. The arena is going to help enormously. So I would support wholeheartedly this amendment. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Councillor Irene Manning. I remind members you've got 3 minutes. Non-leaders, 3 minutes, please. Irene? Are you there, Irene? You raise your hand. Are you on mute? No? Okay, Councillor Jennifer Rayner.
I'm unmuted. Sorry, it's Irene again. I just wanted to thank and support what Councillor Francis Davis said. Swansea needs to reinvent itself. I have a huge faith in our ability to attract tourism, and I thank Councillor Stewart for the work he's done in the UK. And that's the Palace Theatre, the Art Deco Albert Hall building.
Losing you, Erin, you're fading.
The work that's been done in the Copper Quarter and the lighting that might appear on the promenade. I would ask about the single span bridge we had as a slip bridge. I feel that the existing Guildhall, which is our only grade 1 building, would be adequately graced by any future plans you might have for the single span bridge. I would like also to thank all the frontline services, including cleansing, who I hold very close to my heart. Cleansing, the gully gentlemen and the gentlemen filling the potholes. But my admiration for the budget, but also our faith now in Swansea as some kind of cultural and also architectural. It's a fantastic city, and we have so much that we could bring as attractions to tourism in. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Jim Rayner.
Thank you. I'm really proud of this budget and support the motion for the amendment as well. I think we're very lucky in Wales because we have a much more transparent system. When the leader and I met with school head teachers in January, we made the best offer that was available at the time. I'm pleased to say that, as we promised, as more money comes online for education, it goes straight to schools and to the education service. How different this is in England. And this is where Paxton Hood Williams and Lyndon Jones get a bit muddled with their RSG and their Barnett formula. Let's remember, in England, there's a lot of, shall we say, off-east financing. In England, million after million has gone on academies built where it was convenient, not necessarily in the best place for access for children. Very few of them have been financially successful, and very few of them have actually delivered the improvements in education standards that they promised. We don't have faith schools. The money we get from the Welsh Government goes to our schools and to our support services. And I know the Conservatives in particular like to say, oh no, there's far too much held back by bureaucracy. Can I say, in Swansea, we have regular meetings with our head teachers as to what needs to be provided centrally. What the Conservatives describe as bureaucracy not going to schools includes the organisation and arrangement of school transport, schools catering and meals, school dinners, legal services, services for additional learning needs children, and we only have to look just over the bridge at the mess Bristol has got into because it hasn't had the funding to respond in that way. And we have an excellent school support service. And as is here, perhaps the Conservative spokesman for education would like to take this opportunity to thank centralised school services and challenge advisors for assisting the school where he is a governor to get to adopt and fully respond to the recommendations Estin made, because there were areas of leadership where the school was not performing sufficiently well. Was that bureaucracy, keeping money back from schools, or was it essential support services? So whenever a Conservative says, oh, it's bad in Wales, just look a little deeper. They clearly don't know what they're talking about. Happy to support this amendment. I think we should be very proud of what we're doing. And can I thank all my Cabinet colleagues and Labour councillor colleagues for their ongoing support in making education a major priority. Thank you.
So, Presiding member, I was just about to make a point of order because the last speaker went for way over 3 minutes, and I think we should keep to the time and the rules.
Mr. Ben Smith has asked to come back in. Ben.
Thank you, presiding member. It's in response to the question posited by Councillor Peter May, and I am aware you dealt with it summarily. You're absolutely right that both amendments are lawful, otherwise I wouldn't have allowed them to proceed. But with permission, I would like to reiterate the advice I gave, which is the clear officer advice of myself and the Chief Exec around the planning assumptions. The planning assumptions in the MTFP were for 5%. I do appreciate that it is a movable feast, and I do appreciate the members have to weigh their duties to their constituents and that politics will play a part in this. But it is clear that whilst both amendments are lawful, the officer advice is that the Chief Exec and the Section 151 officer get more and more nervous the lower you go when you view the very medium term and the longer term. I have to say that. So there's a distinction between what is lawful and what is reasonable. Both of them are lawful, both of them are reasonable in isolation in a year, but I would counsel that members, when they consider both this amendment and the next amendment and the substantive original motion, that the officer advice is noted. But I do appreciate that members do have to weigh up all of those matters on that. So I thank you for calling me back in, presiding member. Thank you.
Councillor Paxton Williams, normally call you a second time, Paxton, but as you speak in as group leader tonight on it, so briefly, please.
Well, thank you, presiding member. I do appreciate that, I have to say. It's just that I got to state the facts again, because I know there are members in this chamber who do not like the facts I state. The facts are facts, and you can't argue with them. But effectively, since Labour has
point of order, Chair.
Swansea, since Labour's been
point of order, Chair. Point of order.
What's the point of order?
The point of order, he's coming back on just to repeat what he said earlier. So why is he being allowed back in just to repeat what he said previously? His words, not mine. That is not reasonable.
Sorry,
so
I understand, Robert, why you don't want to hear this. I fully understand.
No, I've already heard enough fairy tales tonight. Thank you.
We were doing quite well up until this stage. That's not order, Councillor Francis. Paxton, briefly, please, just don't repeat what you said previously. Something new.
I was wanting to correct what has been said previously, for fact, Chairman. So I'll make it a point of information rather than a speech. And that way I think I can clear that, and I can say quite clearly that the Welsh Government, since you've been in power, has had over a 30% increase in its budget. Until the last 2 years, it decided not to pass any of that money on to you, onto Swansea. In fact, it went down, and it's only now that you're beginning to see some money. So the austerity, where it's come to Swansea, has not come from Westminster. It's come from a Welsh Government, which has had the budget to do it, but decided it wasn't going to fund councils via the RSG. Thank you, Chairman, the presiding member. That's all I wanted to say as a point of information.
3 minutes, Mark, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I'll keep it brief or try to. Yeah, just obviously in support of the budget and the amendment, and to make some comments on some of the comments that have been made, particularly by members of the opposition. I know Councillor Chris Hawley said that he congratulated the leader on his extra funding that was being put into social services and education, but then wanted to remind the leader that the leader represents the whole of Swansea, not just certain areas. What I saw was a budget that talked about businesses throughout and across Swansea, supporting them. I saw a budget that said extra highway spend across Swansea, improvements in our patch system, 48-hour pothole pledge across Swansea, play fund, massive increase in play fund expenditure that all councillors are benefiting from now, or at least should be, because it's across all wards. That's what I saw. I then saw a announcement as well about supporting local communities like Calais Shopping Precinct, Clydach, Morriston, Mumbles, etc. So what I saw in front of me was a budget that supported every corner of Swansea. The contradiction was then that Councillor Lyndon Jones came on to say that he wanted to congratulate the leader on remembering where Mumbles was. Well, you can't have it always. You can't accuse the leader of not covering all of Swansea and then later a different opposition councillor congratulating the leader and reminding him where Mumbles was. And perhaps Councillor Lyndon Jones needs reminding of where Mumbles is, because we certainly haven't forgotten. As Councillor Robert Francis said, during the lockdown period, we worked tirelessly, cross-portfolio, to support businesses that would have gone under in and around Mumbles. Has he forgotten the recent reduction we made in parking charges in Mumbles to support local businesses? No recognition of them whatsoever. So I think, people need to be careful of what they're saying and remember that this authority here is supporting the whole of Swansea across all parts of it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Alison Pugh. Alison?
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Member. It does still amaze me after all this time, really, that we can all look at a budget and the need in the community and yet see it so differently, and people are choosing to ignore the truth that is right in front of us. But I fully, welcome and support this budget and wholeheartedly support the amendment. We have a long road ahead for thousands of people in our community, and I'm sure that the people of Swansea will feel relieved at this budget and will welcome the reduction in council tax and the help that our staff are providing on a daily basis to try and relieve the pressures. So that's all I want to say. I'm just very, very grateful that we can put this out there for people, because we're certainly not out of the issues yet. We've got a long road ahead.
Thank you, Alison. And finally, Councillor Kerry Evans. Kerry?
Yes, thank you, Presiding Member. Just briefly before I endorse the budget, I just wanted to say to Councillor Paxton Hood-Williams that you opened your comments with saying that the benefits to Swansea have come via Westminster to Cardiff to us in Swansea, and that's the way things work. Yet when it comes to cuts, apparently it doesn't work the same way. But anyway, quickly, I'd like to fully support this budget and the amendment presented by the leader. As most of you know, I have a particular interest in children's services, and I'm very, very pleased that we are able to invest further funding in such a vital service and such a good one in Swansea. The budget evidences the ambition of a Labour-led Swansea Council, and you can see the evidence of this ambition, not just in this budget, but if you take a drive through Swansea, many of us can't, but hopefully we'll be able to soon, to see the work that's going on, not just in the city centre, but all over Swansea, as Councillor Alison Pugh just said, and Mark Thomas, that we've been able to do this despite 10 years of systemic defunding of public services by, frankly, a callous and indifferent Tory government in Westminster who has no interest in Wales, let alone Swansea, is testament to the commitment and the expertise of Labour leaders, both in Cardiff and in Swansea. And I personally think we've probably got the best leader here in Swansea that any council has in the UK. And I think what this budget shows is that Labour cares about Swansea and Labour cares about Wales. And I think this budget is evidence of this fact. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kerry. I did say Kerry was the last, but Christine Richards. Christine, you're the last speaker.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I wasn't going to say anything, and it's just a very small contribution. Clearly, I'm delighted to support this amendment and this budget, and like other colleagues who've said, I'm very proud to be part of the administration that is bringing this budget to the people of the City and County of Swansea. I would say greetings from the western border of City and County of Swansea. And I just have to make a comment that I became a councillor back in 2008, and I was a councillor during the time of the administration of Chris Holly and the other members, And I know about some wards being, shall we say, left out of developments, and others not. Councillor Robert Smith, who's in the adjoining ward to myself, we share the fabulous Lycha Foreshore Park between us, and there is a tarmac path that ends at the border between our two wards, which in the times of Mr. Holly's, Councillor Holly's administration, his colleague, Councillor Darren Price, was part of his administration team, and Councillor Raymond James, who was a Labour member, was not. So that path is there for all to see what actually does happen when you favour some wards over others. I'm delighted that we've been given as part of this administration, that we've seen the ability to spend community budgets in our wards. I, for one, have been able to work minor miracles with my community budget, and I look forward to continuing serving the people of Lower Lycha, the westernmost outpost of our empire, for the next year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine.
Can I have one other point of information, please, presiding member? For Councillor Evans?
No.
No. Okay, you don't want me to clear up a mistake that he's made? All right, I'll just take a chance to do it quickly. Just
might be a leadership bill.
Just leave my...
No, you can't.
Can we stop this nonsense?
You can't be allowed to say
It's a
that.
passionate Williams show.
Keep on going. Just keep on
Just
talking.
to remind you, that it was a Conservative Secretary of State in a Conservative government that provided the city deal for Swansea.
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we had to drag her to the Liberty Stadium to sign it, didn't we?
Point of order, Chair. Can we stop this being a party breaker?
And now we're to the vote. Are you all?
Presiding member, it's a shame that we've lost Paxton, I'm sure, but if we're raising points of order and corrective statements, I'd like to make a corrective statement or two. Councillor Hood-Williams actually referred to the late.
It's not a shame, Andrea. The mics have been cut off.
Oh, sorry, presiding member, and I was in full flow then. I was just going to say that it's a shame that Councillor Hood-Williams has been cut off, trying to issue corrective statements. I'd like to issue a few corrective statements of my own, if that's okay. I will be supporting this amendment. As colleagues have said, this is probably the most ambitious and...
I'll leave it muted for 2 minutes.
What's happening, Chair?
Somebody's moved in.
Sorry, presiding member, my mic keeps muting for some unknown reason. I just very quickly make the points. Councillor Hood-Williams said that Labour left a significant debt when they left UK government. To put it into perspective, Labour left a £90 million debt. HS2 is expected to be over 107 billion alone. So they're into the trillions at the moment, and that's not just due to the pandemic, that's due to them borrowing and not taxing companies like Amazon. I'm not going to go onto my soapbox, Chairman. And also, Councillor Hood-Williams said the council tax is 2 to 1. I think he needs to take a maths class, presiding member, because that's not true. Council tax is around 1/3 of our budget. And I just wanted to put those statements out there. And I'm grateful. Sorry about the mic going on and off. We get technical issues, but thank you for allowing me to come in with those corrective statements. And I will be supporting the amendment.
Right, we're ready to move to the vote.
Chair, before you do, I got right of response on the amendment. So if I could just respond to the points, if that's okay, Chair.
You're quite right. Right to reply.
Just to be clear, I know others have referenced it, Chair. I was very clear in my comments about the stimulus fund and about the investment. This is a whole of Swansea programme. Every ward will benefit, and there will be discussions with every ward member and leaders of those communities there about what we can do to support businesses in that area. I referenced, as is my gift during the presentation, examples of where that will go. And I thought it important to draw out the distinction of Mumbles, because I know there's been a lot of chatter about Mumbles, and I wanted to reassure that not only that we would be investing in things like the seawall, but we would be investing directly to assist businesses down there, as Councillor Thomas said we have done throughout the pandemic. And just for Councillor Lyndon Jones's benefit, when the restrictions allow, I'm a regular visitor to Mumbles. I opened facilities down there just a couple of years ago as part of the working that we do with them. And of course, we work closely with Mumbles Community Council as well on a number of issues. You may have realised that we've recently granted a lease for the skate park. We've worked with the organisation to bring Underhill forward. You know, I've certainly been more involved with Mumbles than I think Councillor Lyndon Jones has ever been. And, you know, I'll stand by my record on that. In terms of the Paxton Hood Williams fairy tale recounts of what's going on, I mean, there's one thing that's clear, is that Paxton Hood Williams cannot have it both ways. When money flows, he claims it's because of the UK government. When money doesn't flow, it's because of everybody else. The reality is we have faced 10 years of austerity, a failed austerity programme which did not achieve its aims. It's been ditched by the current Prime Minister, despite the previous two Conservative Prime Ministers attempting to run a austerity programme. There have been 10 years of hell across the UK. And if Councillor Paxton Hood Williams really wants to put it into context, perhaps he should listen to Rob Whiteman, Chief Executive of the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, who recently said that there are 12 authorities in talks with the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government around Section 114 positions. These are councils in England facing bankruptcy because of the way in which they've been treated over the border. There is no council in that position in Wales because of the protection and support and additional funding made available by Welsh Government during the times of austerity. And as I said before, I would much rather be a Labour leader or leader of an authority in Wales than what I hear from my colleagues over the border in England. And we've got to remember the LGA in England, who have been very, very vocal about the pressures that they're under, are run by the Conservatives. So it's not as if this is coming from other parties, Councillor Paxton Hood Williams. It's your own members telling your own government that they aren't being funded well enough. In terms of other comments made on the budget, I'm very, very grateful for the cross-party support for the budget tonight, and that members recognise the significant investment going in across services, but also help going out to our communities. In terms of Lyndon Jones's comment, again, Councillor Jones's comment on the Barnett formula, I think one thing that he forgets is that there are many things that don't contribute to the Barnett formula that leave us worse off. How about HS2? £107 billion of investment in England with no consequential for Wales. Where's the money for that, Councillor Jones? It does not exist. We are being short-changed in terms of the investment going into England. And in terms of the Levelling Up Fund, I had a conversation with other leaders in Wales today with the Secretary of State. Of the £4.8 billion that has been announced for levelling up, just some 200 million of that will come to Wales. And this year, it looks at less than £40 million will be made available for levelling up. If that is the Tory version of making things fairer, £40 million to a whole nation to try and bring it forward is an offence. It is absolutely offensive. But of course, the Chancellor and his colleagues in London make their choices. I think one of the most interesting choices, as I referenced, was the fact that those on universal credit will see a cliff edge removal of their £20 COVID payment in 6 months' time. But those who are millionaires or billionaires have 5 years to prepare. That shows you exactly where the priorities of the Tories lie. In terms of the points raised by Councillor Mann, I know you broke up a little bit in there, but I would welcome, again, Councillor Mann, your comments in terms of the investment. And I just point out, I know you made comments about the slip bridge. Again, you will recall When we were in opposition, the administration, I can see Councillor Holly smiling already, the administration consulted on a future for the slip bridge, and when it came back and said put the bridge back, the administration decided not to follow the consultation and therefore laid the bridge on the seafront. I give you an absolute guarantee that the Bascule Bridge, which is being restored at the present time, will be restored. We won't be laying that on the promenade. We will be putting it back where it rightly belongs. And we will continue with our commitment that we've made to the Friends of the Slip Bridge, which is there is money set aside in the capital programme, which, if the rest of the money can be raised, will be released to help restore the slip bridge. It's a commitment we've stuck to since we were in opposition. And then finally, just to say, to reiterate, I think Councillor Thomas and Councillor Richards both made the points really, really well. This is a budget for every community. And this administration, these cabinet members and our members have been out there in communities throughout the pandemic. This cabinet was out there dealing with businesses on the ground, helping resolve issues, helping get solutions for people so they survived COVID. I didn't see you in Mumbles, Councillor Lyndon Jones, when we were doing that. I saw Councillor David Hopkins, I saw Councillor Mark Thomas, I saw Councillor Robert Francis Davis, all meeting with businesses, finding solutions, offering help. You were nowhere to be seen. That's what I saw. And then finally, Councillor Richards, I am very pleased that we will be able to put a fair position in place where every ward will benefit, and where the previous administration may have ended at the wards controlled by its own members' administration, we will ensure that every area of Swansea benefits and has an equal chance to bid into the restoration and recovery funds that we are setting up. Thank you, Chair. And with that, I formally move.
Thank you, Leader. It's been moved and seconded. David Hopkins seconded it. So, Mr. Evans, you take the vote.
Okay, before I take the vote, just to remind you what the vote is for. This vote is on the Labour Group amendment, which reads, we said we should continue to monitor changes in funding allocations and announcements by Welsh Government and UK Government budgets as we came to set the final council tax rate for Swansea. Given recent announcements and to recognise the struggle many families and residents will face coming out of the pandemic, we intend to act to support our communities. Therefore, we can announce we intend to reduce the stated rise in council tax by a further 1% over the previous 3.99%, which in itself was reduced from the 5% planning assumption. This will be funded by reallocating monies available as part of a reduction in our capital charges costs of 1.166 million and a consequential reduction in council tax reduction scheme costs of 0.154 million. Therefore, we can utilise 1.320 million in total to reduce council tax for the coming year to 2.99%. I will now proceed to the vote. So on the amendment you are voting, so please say if you are for, against or abstaining. Councillor Cyril Anderson.
For.
Peter Black.
Sorry, you call me then.
Peter Black.
Abstain.
Jim Burdenshaw.
For.
Mark Child.
For.
Jan Curtis. Jan Curtis. Councillor Curtis.
Sorry, can you hear me, Hill?
No, yes.
Yes, for.
Councillor Nick Davis.
For.
Mike Day.
Abstain.
Phil Dowding.
For.
Alan Doyle.
For.
Mike Dirk.
For.
Kerry Evans.
For.
Mandy Evans.
4.
Will Evans.
4.
Wendy Fitzgerald.
Abstain.
Robert Francis Davis.
4.
Steve Gallagher.
Abstain.
Louise Gibbard.
4.
Fiona Gordon.
4.
Kevin Griffiths.
Abstain.
Joe Hale. David Helliwell.
Abstain, but I can't get in. You're in.
Sorry, you can't get into what?
I can't get rid of them. Can't get any pictures or anything at the moment. Abstain anyway.
Okay. Councillor Terry Hennigan. Councillor Chris Holly.
Abstain.
Councillor Paxton Hood Williams.
Abstain.
Councillor Beverly Hopkins.
4.
David Hopkins.
4.
Oliver James.
4.
Linda James. Yvonne Jardine.
4.
Jeff Jones.
Abstain.
Lyndon Jones.
Abstain.
Mary Jones.
Abstain.
Peter Jones. Sue Jones.
Hugh, she's having a problem. Connection's dropping out.
Okay, I'll come back to her at the end. Elliot King. Erica Kirshner.
4.
Miles Langston. Andrew Lewis.
4.
Mike Lewis.
4.
Richard Lewis. Wendy Lewis.
4.
Clive Lloyd.
4.
Paul Lloyd.
4.
Irene Mann. 4. Councillor Irene Mann. Okay, I'll go on. Councillor Penny Matthews.
4.
Councillor Peter May.
4.
Councillor Hazel Morris.
4.
David Hopkins. Say David Phillips, apologies. David Phillips.
4.
Sharon Philpott.
Abstain.
Sam Pritchard.
4.
Alison Pugh.
4.
Jen Rayner.
4.
Christine Richards.
4.
Kelly Roberts.
4.
Bridget Rowlands.
Abstain.
Mary Sherwood. Paulette Smith. Robert Smith.
4.
Andrew Stevens.
4.
Rob Stewart.
4.
Gareth Sullivan.
Abstain.
Mo Sykes.
4.
Gloria Tanner. Des Thomas. Graham Thomas.
Abstain.
Mark Thomas.
4.
Will Thomas. Linda Tyler Lloyd.
Abstain.
Gordon Walker.
4.
Leslie Walton.
4.
Mike White.
4.
And if I just go back to Councillor Sue Jones. No. And Councillor Irene Mann. No. Jeez.
Sue.
Oh, it's Councillor Sherwood back, so I'm told.
Sue Jones.
Yeah, okay, Sue.
In and out. Abstain.
I am back, Hugh, Mary Sherwood. I did say 4, but I think you already had me down as having gone. I'm back. Thank you.
Okay, so you're okay. And then man once again.
Hugh, it's Linda James. I've just managed to get back in again. Can I vote?
You can. Give me a moment. Here I am. And how are you voting, Linda?
Abstain.
Okay. It's a bit confusing, this one. Okay, it's 43 votes for and 19 abstentions. So this is now the substantive motion.
Okay, and at that juncture, we will take a 10-minute break. We'll hear the opposition amendment then when we resume.